Swirl of violence. Roman-Germanic conflicts is an intriguing historical theme, and crafting a detailed story around it requires an in-depth narrative spanning various aspects of the historical background, the motivations of different characters, and the intense battle scenes. Here's a synopsis of how a 6,000-word story might unfold around this theme. In the year 9 AD, during the waning days of Roman Emperor Augustus's rule, the Roman Empire stretches vast and mighty, its borders reaching into regions now known as Germany. The Romans, led by their general Publius Quinctilius Varus, have encountered fierce resistance from Germanic tribes led by Arminius, a former Roman ally turned fierce defender of his homeland. Arminius has formed an alliance of tribes to oppose Rome's expansion. The story opens with the imposing sight of 3 Roman legions marching through the dense, foreboding forests of Teutoburg. General Varus is confident in his campaign to civilize Germania, imposing Roman laws and customs on the native people. However, Arminius has carefully orchestrated an ambush, using his knowledge of Roman tactics and his intimate understanding of the land to gain an advantage. Tension mounts as Arminius, a warrior deeply conflicted between his Roman military training and loyalty to his tribe, prepares to lead his people into a battle that will determine the future of Germania. Throughout the story, the clash between Roman and Germanic ideologies becomes palpable, with Romans driven by the ideals of order, law, and expansion, and the Germanic tribes fighting for freedom, survival, and their ancestral lands. As the story unfolds, readers witness moments of personal conflict among Roman soldiers, who are far from home and fearful of the unfamiliar territory. Likewise, the Germanic warriors show both valor and vulnerability, torn between their distrust of Rome and their longing for the unity Arminius promises. The climactic battle is depicted with vivid intensity, highlighting the chaos of the forest ambush, where the Romans find their rigid formations broken and their soldiers scattered. In the midst of the battle, Varus and Arminius come face to face, each embodying the conflict of their respective civilizations. The story closes with Varus's defeat and the Germanic tribes claiming a hard-won victory that will echo through history, marking the beginning of the decline of Roman expansion into Germania. If you'd like the full 6,000-word narrative based on this outline or specific scenes fleshed out, feel free to let me know, and I can provide detailed sections or expand on particular elements, such as character interactions, battle descriptions, or, certainly, let's dive deeper into the 6,000-word story, exploring the conflicts and emotions of the characters, the details of the Germanic ambush, and the intensity of the Roman-Germanic clash in a vivid, continuous narrative. Here's the next expanded portion based on the initial outline. The dawn was a pale, thin light filtering through the towering canopy of oaks and pines. Roman general Publius Quinctilius Varus surveyed the forest, his sharp gaze sweeping over the land that seemed to close in around them. The woods were oppressive, tangled with thick underbrush, and stretched on endlessly, dark as the stormy sea. But Varus was untroubled. He'd led Roman legions through countless battles, conquered lands, and crushed rebellions in distant provinces. Germania was, to him, just another land to be brought to heel under the might of Rome. Varus's face was stern as he looked back at his men. 3 legions, nearly 18,000 soldiers, all trained to move as a single, deadly unit. Their armor gleamed in the morning light, and their shields bore the proud symbols of Rome. He saw soldiers grumbling and shivering in the cold damp, but that didn't concern him. The men were veterans hardened from previous campaigns. They were Romans, after all, and the wild lands of Germania would soon feel the weight of their presence. At Varus's side rode Arminius, his trusted Germanic auxiliary and former Roman hostage. Arminius wore the Roman cuirass with ease, his eyes sharp and piercing as they scanned the forest around them. Varus trusted him, for Arminius had fought with them, bled with them, and brought intelligence on the various Germanic tribes that plagued their mission. Yet, beneath Arminius's composed exterior, there was a fierce determination burning, one that only his closest allies could perceive. For Arminius, the moment he'd awaited for years was finally approaching. Trained as a Roman soldier, he had earned their trust, only to one day wield it against them. The Germans, his people, had not forgotten the atrocities committed by the legions, nor had they forgiven the encroachment of Roman rule upon their lands. He was now their leader, a unifier of the tribes, and he bore the weight of their expectations on his shoulders. His heart throbbed with the knowledge of what he must do, even as he wore the Roman armor and marched alongside their ranks. Days passed in tense silence as the legions continued through the narrow trails of the forest, their movements growing slower, their spirits dampened by the oppressive air of the land. The paths became muddier, the trees grew denser, and the natural rhythm of the Roman army was disrupted. The soldiers murmured uneasily, and even the officers found themselves glancing around, eyes darting to every rustle in the bushes, every shadow cast by the trees. Finally, the fateful day came. The legions were deep within the Teutoburg forest, isolated from any reinforcements, with no signs of Roman settlements or allies. Arminius, having guided the legions into the depths, slipped away with the excuse of rallying local scouts. Varus, unsuspecting, allowed him to leave, unaware that his loyal Germanic auxiliary was about to betray him. The ambush began as a whisper, a low rustling that grew into a cacophony of battle cries. Warriors painted in the symbols of their tribes burst from the undergrowth, unleashing a fury the Romans had never seen. They struck from all directions, blending into the trees, then vanishing before the Romans could mount an organized response. Roman soldiers fell in clusters, their ranks disordered, struggling to form their signature formations in the chaotic forest. General Varus shouted commands, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of battle. His officers scrambled, trying to rally their men, but the Germanic warriors, familiar with the forest's twists and turns, struck with deadly precision. The Romans, weighted down by their armor and unfamiliar with the terrain, became easy prey. Amidst the chaos, Arminius moved through the battlefield like a storm. He called out in his native tongue, rallying his people and urging them to press the advantage. His heart pounded as he saw his countrymen pushing the Romans back, and his blood sang with the thrill of liberation. This was what he'd trained for, what he'd planned in the shadows of Roman rule. His voice rose above the clash of steel and the cries of the dying, a call for freedom that stirred his warriors into a frenzy. The battle stretched on for days, a relentless siege that chipped away at the Roman legions. As the days passed, the Romans grew weaker, their formations breaking, their morale shattered. Supplies dwindled, and the relentless attacks from the Germanic warriors showed no sign of abating. Varus watched in despair as his proud legions, once symbols of Roman supremacy, were torn apart by the seemingly endless waves of Germanic fighters. By the third day, Varus knew that defeat was inevitable. His once loyal ally, Arminius, had turned the very land against him, using every rock, every tree, as a weapon. The Roman discipline that had won them countless battles was worthless here, in the depths of the Germanic wilderness. His legions, proud and disciplined, were being decimated by an enemy they could neither see nor predict. In a final act of defiance, Varus called his remaining officers together. Bloodied and weary, they gathered around him, their eyes hollow with the knowledge that they would not see another dawn. He ordered them to fall upon their swords, to deny the Germanic tribes the satisfaction of taking their lives. Varus himself took his own life, a final act of defiance against the humiliation of capture. One by one, his officers followed, and their bodies lay in the forest, symbols of the empire they had served. As dawn broke over the forest, Arminius and his warriors stood among the fallen Romans, their victory hard-won and drenched in blood. The Germanic tribes had triumphed, and Arminius had fulfilled his destiny, delivering his people from the clutches of Rome. But even as he looked upon the broken bodies of his enemies, a part of him remained troubled, haunted by the years he'd spent as a Roman soldier, by the bonds he'd formed with men he had now led to their deaths. The victory at Teutoburg Forest marked a turning point in history, a day that would be remembered by Rome and Germania alike. For Rome, it was a devastating defeat that would haunt them for years to come, a brutal reminder of the limits of their power. For Germania, it was a day of liberation, a testament to the strength and resilience of a people united in the face of oppression. As the Germanic warriors returned to their villages, Celebrating their hard-won freedom, Arminius remained silent. His mind filled with memories of the battle, of the men he had once called comrades. He had achieved what he'd set out to do, but the victory was tinged with sorrow, for he knew that in choosing his people, he had lost a part of himself. The swirl of violence that had consumed them all had left its mark, not only on the land, but on the souls of those who had fought.